handling. Allen. Oh, and it's a wonderful ball and a terrific goal. Jason Cummings. Hibs have a lift-off in 2015. I have to say they just deserve it for me. What a wonderful, wonderful ball by Scott Allen. Simply takes out his feet. He doesn't even look, he plays it pretty blind. He just whips it into that area. It's great movement by Cummings and the finish is exquisite. Here you go, he's facing the opposite stand, he whips it in. Ostap doesn't match the run of Cummings. And Cummings, confident as ever, little side foot finish. They deserve it. Alan Stubbs was willing it home. Jason Cummings with his first derby goal. Came off Stanton's boot, Robinson, and Hibs looking very exposed here. Nicholson with the pass, it might fall for Billy King, he could finish it! Billy King! 2-0 to Hearts! And the message is clear at Tynecastle. Not on this patch of Edinburgh land. Not in a derby. No relegation today.
Thank you for staying with us on Monday Night Football. Those were clips of our recent podcast guest, Derek Gray. He's very nicely gifted those to us, so you will hear those on a regular basis to indicate the different sections of chat. I played both this week because we're going to talk about both clubs now because of, for obvious reasons, with the Hibernian Supporters Limited chat. We've gone incredibly long, longer than I think we have ever gone before. We will come back. I'm going to play in clips though of our interview with Derek Gray and our interview with Christian Naddy, both of which were conducted in the past week and are now available on both our iTunes and our Mixcloud. So we will end the show with clips from those just to give you a taster of exactly what you're going to get if you download those. For now, we're going to go into Hearts though. It's been a pretty Hibs heavy show so far. We will come back with a lot of chat about the game at Ibrox on Friday night, but because we're maybe going to spend a wee bit less time on the Hearts, we'll do them first. Guys, Sean and Ross, a fairly straightforward one again.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a resounding victory, but it definitely done the job. It's one of those ones that Scott probably didn't like it because he made his feelings clear earlier in the season that he doesn't want 1-0s to scrape through the rest of the season. But it's one of those ones I'm more than happy with it. It's 3 points on the board. It's that bit closer to the league being done and dusted, so it works for me.
Ross, let's go with positives first. What were the positives for you, or what was the standout positive for you from that game? Was it simply the 3 points?
It wasn't just the 3 points. I think the substitutes came at the right time as well, particularly when Gomez came on. He changed the game, and the way that our midfield shaped up suited us really well. Also, it was a bit of a strange lineup to begin with. Obviously Gomez just needed a bit of a rest maybe. So in terms of the positives, I'm slightly different. I was a wee bit annoyed at the performance, just because of the striking options not really doing the job they're supposed to. But positives from the game that were quite solid. Neil Alexander was fantastic when he was called upon. Really good couple of saves. Again, Gomez was fantastic. Our Zeefuik was okay. I'm kind of struggling to come up with better options than that, but yeah, some really good individual performances. Jamie Walker for me was man of the match. I think he was absolutely fantastic. Piardo again as well was also brilliant. It's a fight between those two players as to kind of who my favourite is at the moment.
Okay, let's go on with Walker then. Sean, around me there were a few murmurings about, let's say, dissatisfaction at Walker playing deeper. picking up the ball just inside the Livingston half. However, he does, and I can see the point for that, but he does thrive when he's got the game in front of him, doesn't he? And he's able to see where the gaps are and simply drive with the football into those gaps. There were a couple of moments, the one in particular when he feeds the ball into Zeefuik, gets it back and probably should score, but that, in terms of the dynamism of driving 50 yards to goal, that was pretty impressive, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the example I was going to talk about there, was once again, to go back to Zeefuik, he might not have had his best game in a Hearts shirt, but he still has the, as you call them, Sam, the hand chest, or the chest hand as you called it. His control's unbelievable. It's like he catches the ball and then just puts it down where he wants to. But no, Jamie Walker is on an amazing run of form at the moment. A run of form that I wouldn't have expected from Jamie Walker last season. It seems like his engine's improved so much. Just his general vision, as you say, he's seen the passes that just weren't there to him previously. But as you saw it there, just playing from that deeper role, I thought it actually gave him the opportunity to not only for him to see the passes, but for him to see the runs. As you say, with that one, he was able to feed the ball into Zeefuik and then see exactly where he should be going to feed off it. But with that as well, a little bit fortunate with the goal, how it rebounds off him. But how many times do you see that happen with Luis Suarez or whoever else? Everyone needs that wee bit of luck every once in a while. It's just how you capitalise on it. But brilliant to round the keeper in a good finish once again. Long may it continue.
Okay, before we move on to the slightly more negative aspects of it then, the other main positive in terms of the scoreline at least was the fact that we returned to keeping a clean sheet. How big is that psychologically, Ross, to show that the defensive solidity is still there? It had maybe just been lacking for a few weeks.
Yeah, with the recent changes we've had maybe in the past month and a half, with Ozturk going out, McGee coming in playing left back, Eckersley coming in was really vital for us. I was still pining for McHattie to come back, but there was a lot of space that he could have capitalised on, but McHattie would have there, and especially this new shape we're playing. But Eckersley is really solid defensively. I think we should be looking to keep him longer term. Callum Patterson didn't have his best games, but then again, everyone has those types again now and again, especially if you're a young player. Wilson and Ozturk are obviously our best two centre backs. It's good to have them playing as much as we can. I think the midfielders in front of them seem a bit more calmer on the ball when they're there, because they know we've got two footballing defenders behind them, and the fact that we've got Jordan McGee to come in at any time when he's asked is a fantastic option to have. Probably the best defensive option to have on the bench in the league. So to keep a clean sheet is absolutely fantastic. You can tell Neil Alexander really cares when we lose a goal. He's at whoever's fault it was straight away. If it's his own fault, then fair enough, like with the Livingston goal the last time we played them. So absolutely brilliant for us to keep another clean sheet, and again, long way to continue.
Okay, let's move on to a slightly more negative side then. Scott's raised a couple of questions despite his absence. He's still playing some part in the show. He asked specifically, was it poor man management from Robbie to play Kenny Anderson out of position on his first home match and to take him off at half time? Sean, what are your thoughts on that?
Part of me agrees with Scott there. Part of me thinks that if you are, especially with this first start him in his natural position, let him bed in, and if we want to move him from there and try him in other positions, then that's fine. But it was one of those, he did see enough of the ball, he did do various things, he necessarily never took those opportunities. So part of, I didn't disagree with him coming off at half time, but I was kind of shocked when it did happen. Billy King came on and done very well for him, so it was good tactics from Robbie Neilson in that point. But I think it was weird. I mean, he was naturally gravitating to the right side. Having watched what I've seen of him in Holland, that's really not where he thrives. Robbie Neilson might prove us wrong long term. I mean, this might become his position, or it might be a facet that he adds to his game to make him even stronger, but it was a surprise for me at this point in time.
Ross, from the limited amount that we've seen from Kenny Anderson so far, and the fact that Robbie made the decision so quickly at the weekend, do we think that if we're going to see him at the moment, we're more likely to see him in Jamie Walker's position, the position of the striker?
Yeah, that seems to be his natural position. From all the videos we've seen, it's always, apparently coming from a box-to-box midfielder. He's been really good. You can tell he's a really intelligent player, especially on his debut. That goal that he scored, the run that he made for it was fantastic, and not many players will see that type of run. Fortunately, he's the type of player that Robbie Neilson and Craig Levein have obviously looked at. Maybe he might have not been the first choice, we'll never know that, but again, I'm not going to go against their judgment. From what we've seen him so far, he's been very good. He was a bit quiet in the game against Livingston. He was hooked to half time, which is fair enough. I agree with Sean there, I didn't disagree with it. I think because he's coming at a time where we're changing our system to accommodate him, he's going to take a wee bit longer for us to see the better version of him. I think if he was to come in and go straight into Jamie Walker's role, we would see a bit more of him. But because Jamie Walker is on the type of form that he is, unfortunately for Kenny Anderson, he's going to be on the right hand side, and Blackman's going to be on the left. Maybe that's something we'll have to look at in the future, but at this moment in time it's working for us. So
yeah, I think it's slightly similar to the El Hasnoui situation as well, that he came in and was having to almost play as a target man or play as the solo striker, which once again wasn't his position. I still don't think we've seen the best of him, but given the opportunity in the right position, I think we will see the promise from both of them that we expected when they've signed.
Okay, the one other question that Scott raised as we start to wrap up on this Hearts game, who would you start for the upcoming games? Would you go with So or would you go with Zeefuik? Ross, you've given a slight indication maybe already. Sean, what would your choice be if both are fit?
I still think Zeefuik has done tremendously well since he's came in. To be honest, at this moment in time, I would rather Keaton's drop out. I think he's flattered to deceive in the past couple of weeks. The good things he was doing, it seems like he's got amnesia and he's just forgot how to actually do them. He's not exploiting his pace or even offering width that he can do. We know he can do it. He done it at Hamilton last year. For me, I would go for Zeefuik, purely just, although he never scored last week, he scored in every single game before that, as just his quality on the ball shines through for me. So
Zeefuik and Keatings or Zeefuik and So?
I don't know. For me, So needs to do something to get back in the team, but I think Keatings could possibly benefit from dropping to the bench for a game.
Okay, Ross, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, again, I'll stick to my kind of answer of So and Keatings up front, but at this moment in time I have no problems with Zeefuik being our first choice even in front of Keatings, because he doesn't deserve to be dropped at the moment, and So has shown, well, he's not really shown his potential of what he was like at the beginning of the season since he's come back from his injury. We can't punish Zeefuik for that, unfortunately. So might have to fight his way back in the team. I have no problems with Zeefuik and So being up front, but we need the So that we know to be there. Keatings for me is a fantastic player. He's one of our most intelligent strikers, and he'll find space in the box. We're going to spend more of our time in the opposition's half. I think Keating's there is vital for us in case there's a scrappy goal now and again, or an individual piece of brilliance, which we've seen from him a couple of times, and not forgetting the set piece factor as well. Yep. He's shown that he's probably, him and Alim are fighting for who's our first choice. It
is interesting to see how quickly things can turn around in football, though, because I think we spoke about a fortnight ago and said that at the moment Keatings is the first name on the team sheet in terms of strikers. He's the form guy, he's the one that looks like he's carrying a goal at all times, and I think the last 2 weeks have served to the point where I think I would probably go with Zeefuik and So this weekend if So is fit, just to maybe give Keatings a wee moment out of the firing line, because he does look like he's slightly lost that form and he's not carrying that goal threat any longer. I think when he went off, it was one of those scenarios where you're thinking, oh, is he still on? Because second half he really drifted out of proceedings and he wasn't involved in any way. And Zeefuik does as well, but mainly because you don't get service into him. He's very much a player dependent on service. Keating should be a little bit more mobile, able to drop in and get involved, and we didn't really see that from the weekend. Right, we're going to do the preview of the next game as well. Just very quickly, Queen of the South, what are our thoughts? What are our score predictions for that?
I think partly it'll be dependent on the weather at the game. If it's high winds or anything like that, that plays slightly more into their hands, although we've seen us deal with it well, say at Alloway earlier in the season. I'll go with 2-0 Hearts.
Ross?
I absolutely agree 100% with the conditions coming into play. We seem to cope well with these trips that we're all kind of worried about. Hopefully this isn't the first one where we're kind of going, well, the pitch did cause a really massive part in our draw or whatever. I think it's going to be 2-0 for us. I think it's going to be a hard game, but hopefully Zeefuik gets a goal and Keating gets a goal, because they both need it, I think, at the moment. I
think this is actually arguably our biggest test left this season, because as the games go on, there are tests of equal proportion, maybe even more so. Hibs at Easter Road, with the way they're playing, is a massive test, but by that point the league could be almost won, in which case you lose, well, there's another day, we win it another day. Same with Ibrox, it could be the situation where you're thinking, actually we didn't have to win this game. A draw would maybe do us in terms of pushing us over the line. At the moment we want to keep eating into that lead, and we do have a run of games that should be winnable, and need to be winnable if we are going to sweep up the title in the way that we hope to. And with that in mind, I think this weekend is an absolutely massive test. I do think we've got enough about us to do it, but I do think we will need to raise the performance level slightly and quell the fears a wee bit from the stand. I think being away from home might actually help that, because it is starting, as we say, the old sentiment keeps being brought up, if you win 1-0 every week you win the league. But people didn't settle for that. No. Because when you're 1-0 up, people aren't thinking, well, that's fine, we'll win 1-0. People are thinking, we're going to draw this or we're going to lose this. We saw that. We were 1-0 up with 20 minutes to go. They got a man sent off, and really, I think teams that are well versed in winning titles would at that point think, close this game out, manage the game, almost rest players, do whatever you need to. Whereas we're thinking we need a second, and it's that panic that comes in because we're no used to being at the top of the league. We're no used to closing out titles. Yeah, there were certain points in the game at the weekend where a neutral walking into that game would have thought we were 1-0 down. Yeah. Which is just, it seems so bizarre for an atmosphere when it should be a party atmosphere at this point in time. And there's really times where I can't wrap my head around it. Same with the Livingston game at Livingston. It was so negative, to the point of, you can see Callum Patterson's always the key one. If you look at him, his face will tell you the story, or he'll definitely be telling the fans what he's thinking of it. So to your point, that's definitely a good point to be raised, that it's definitely going to have an effect, and I really hope that it's a positive Hearts support travelling through there, because it's a long travel. It could be horrendous weather. We need all the positivity we can get for this one. Okay,
one last point, sorry, just to touch on as well, that I think something that works in our favour is we've been talking about maybe some individual players not playing up to their standard. I think we've got a good few fringe players now that if they get left out again, they're going to get more and more disgruntled. I think that works in our favour, because when they come on as a sub, I think they'll be chomping at the bit to play out of their skin and feel that they can play into the first team. And we've already said previously that we've no problems sticking in McGeehan from the start. We've no problems with sticking Payardo in from the start when he's been off, again up front as well with recently. So our fringe players have got every right to be 100% when they come on and try and prove to Robbie Nielsen that they should be one of the first names on the team sheet. Okay, on that note of defiance, let's wrap up on Hearts then, and let's do the musical chairs. But again, Connor, do you want to jump in for the Hibs chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and we will kick it off straight away. Do we want to start on the positives, or do we want to start on the negatives?
You choose, boss.
Well, I don't want to be seen as focusing on the negatives again, because sometimes as a Jambo it seems like I'm doing that. But let's go with it so that we can end on the positive note and the Hibs are flying into the playoffs kind of thing. Was that right? Let's look at it. Let's firstly assess Alan Stubbs' performance in this situation. Did his tactics work? Is it as simple as Hibs got the 3 points, so yes they did? Or is there a question to be asked about the fact that it was such a different game? Hibs had less dominance there than we had seen previously to suggest that no, maybe they actually didn't. What are your thoughts on that, Mikey?
I can see why you're asking that question, because obviously it was a very different type of performance from what we've seen recently. I think a factor that needs to consider is nobody's seen Rangers play like that in a big match for a long time. They played with actual intensity and with a work rate and a kind of some element of like being a team, which I don't think anybody expected, given it's been a heck of a long time since we saw that. The shape, I don't think it was a great shock to see it come back out. The personnel kind of is reappearing again for us to allow to do that, having Watson there, Forster's on the bench. Yeah, I suppose it can be justified that it wasn't a good call because the performance was so different, but it allowed us to set up in a way that we could, on the rare occasions it was available to us, counter-attack with pace. And obviously the second goal was entirely representative of that. But at the end of the day, the result, we got the result. We were probably under more pressure than we expected. We probably had, I think possession of the ball was fine, but we didn't do a great deal with it. And I think the Rangers midfield were in the faces of our ball players, which hasn't been the case. It's been them treating themselves as a luxury in the previous matches. So I think that they got in the face of McGeoch, in the face of Allen, and in the face of Ivey quite a lot, to stop them having the influence that they do a lot. And I think that Stevenson and Gray, the two fullbacks, played further up the park to stop them getting forward quite so much as happened in the past, despite the fact that Stevens ended up for the second goal 20 yards from goal in the centre of the pitch, kind of having moseyed in for left back. But overall I think that he may not have got it 100% right, but the result was achieved whilst not playing very well. And who's to say we would have done that playing the 4-4-2 shape, and that may not have happened. So we can second guess it all day long, but I'm pretty happy with how it's set up and how it played out.
Okay, Mikey, you touched on there the fact that Rangers played better than we had seen for a long time. Craig, how much of that was down to simply Rangers raising their standards, and how much was it down to Hibs maybe giving them more of an opportunity than they had in previous encounters to establish a bit of a foothold in the game, to get their passes away and play? Were Hibs less intense? Were Hibs less in their faces and allowed them to establish themselves in the game a little bit more?
It seemed that way. I think the shape that we set up allowed Rangers to sort of flood the midfield, and never gave, especially Scott Allen. I think that's probably, bar a couple of passes, that's one of the poorest games Scott Allen's had for us, purely because he's used to getting on the ball, getting space, picking his passes, whereas on Friday night he couldn't really do that. As obviously it's been touched on already about no one really expected that start from Rangers. No one did, because they've been so lethargic and so poor. They actually sort of resembled a team on Friday night, whereas they've been a collection of individuals when you've been watching them, but Friday night they actually looked like a team. And our shape was, it seemed it was more of a 5-3-2 at times than a 3-5-2, because I think when Rangers came out, when they seen the team sheets, they would have remembered what happened to them last time. The first goal was from Stevenson bombing down the left, cutting it into Cummins. The second goal was also Stevenson down the left, and then David Gray coming in, ghosting in at the back post to header it. So I think that played in the back of their minds a bit, and they thought that they had to change the way they start games, so they wouldn't, so Hibs wouldn't have that sort of opportunity to, establish a 2-goal lead like we did the last time.
Okay, let's start to move on to the more positive side of it then. Craig mentioned there that Scott Allen didn't necessarily have his best game for Hibs, Connor, but he did come up with a very telling moment for a pass for the first goal. What were your thoughts on how that goal played out?
I mean, I thought.
I mean, going back to what these guys were saying, I actually think Stubbs got it right, tactics wise, because the 3-5-2 actually, you know, as Craig was just saying, turned more into a 5-3-2, but that flexibility allowed us to be more negative. We now seem to have the personnel that can cope with that. So the likes of Fontaine and Gray, Watson played well, so did Hamlin. I know I'm not answering your question at all here.
It's all right, as long as you get round to it eventually, then I'll accept it.
But, you know, there was a lot of pressure in that first 20 minutes, and it was quite nerve-wracking. I felt it was the most sort of nerve-wracking game against Rangers that we've had so far, and I was really feeling like we need to score quite soon, otherwise things are going to go badly wrong. And it could be called smash and grab or rope-a-dope or whatever, but you know, that movement from Allen to get the ball into the box was fantastic, and you know, Scott Robertson yet again in the right place at the right time, just there to pick up the pieces. That could be called a poacher's goal, but Scott Robertson's been doing it so often recently that I don't think you can purely put it down to luck. And I think we weathered the pressure quite well, although they were attacking us strongly for the first 20 minutes. I felt like we held on quite well. I mean, once Kenny Miller seemed like he had a point to prove, and I think once he went off, you know, things changed quite a bit. I think we were in danger of him just, you know, finding his old form again, and maybe sending in a decent shot or two. But I think we weathered the storm quite well, and as I said, that the two goals came from a kind of counter-attacking position, and the first one, you know, from watching the highlights, you wouldn't have said that Scott Allen had a bad game, but obviously throughout watching the game, the midfield was so flooded with Rangers players that we were struggling to keep up a little, and our full-backs were getting pushed back quite a lot. You know, Stevenson and Gray were playing more like defenders for a change.
The goal in itself, I think the first goal did encapsulate everything at the moment that shows why the momentum is with Hibs, or at least you know, it served to prove that the momentum is with Hibs. When you see the dynamism and the speed of reactions that Robertson shows in comparison to those Rangers players who, despite their better start to the game and their, you know, lifting their standards somewhat, they were heavy-footed to say the least. There is that when you're in the mire and you're going through things, sometimes it does just, in those tiny split-second moments, you don't react in the way that you would if you were really into this and you were enjoying the game. And I think that's, as you say, what we saw with Scott Robertson at that time, that he has an eye for goal at the moment. He's thinking that, you know, that there's no reason he can't be on the score sheet in every game at this moment in time.
Well, and, I do wonder whether Robertson had maybe seen Nade's goal the week before, because although it wasn't quite as farcical, it was the same kind of situation where a few Rangers defenders were a bit slow off the mark, and I wonder if Robertson was just sort of in the right place, thinking, you know, something could come close to me here if I'm sharp enough.
While we're discussing Hibs midfielders, then one person who sticks out, because he very rarely sticks out, I think, is Dylan McGeoch. We've touched on Scott Allen, the fact that Scott Allen is a kind of roller coaster player. Within 90 minutes he can have 2 or 3 moments of real brilliance, or at least something bordering on brilliance, and then he can have 10 minutes where you think you've barely controlled the ball. I think there was one where it dropped out the sky from on the halfway line, and he tried to take a touch and he just fell over 4 yards away from the ball, and you thought, you know, if you were watching that, if someone showed you that clip and said, that's the guy that Dundee United were chasing, he's the replacement for Stuart Armstrong, you'd be thinking, really? But then he puts in the pass for the goal. Whereas Dylan McGeoch is, I've not only have I don't think I've seen him have a bad game. I think I've very rarely seen him have a bad 10 minutes. He seems to just always be 7 or 8 out of 10, even at various moments in the game. It's rare that he has any peaks and troughs. I saw him being acknowledged as man of the match on Friday night there, Mikey. Would you put him in that category on that performance?
I don't think he was man of the match, but I think again he had a superb match. Probably a slightly less appreciated performance than maybe some of the previous weeks, given, like we've said, that Rangers were much more present in the midfield, and he probably didn't get the opportunity to play in the front foot as much. But like I'd said a few weeks ago that I was so impressed with the type of player that he is, and I was surprised by the type of player it is, that he's much more of a grafter than I thought he would be. Still got to look at technical ability I thought he had. He's very, very tidy with the ball, good in small spaces, takes it in small spaces as well. But I'm the unprofessional one. Unbelievable.
Sorry, it was the elephant in the room. I had to acknowledge it at a certain point.
I acknowledge it as well. I just left that as it was, son. That's not getting cut out. Immature man. So now I've lost my train of thought. You killed me.
Dylan McGeoch,
like small spaces. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So like I say, I was really impressed with like the other things he brings to the game. He likes a tackle. You get 90 minutes of proper graft out of him, and I think he's really sort of bubbled under the sort of surface as one of our most important players. And our performances are slightly different when he's not in the team. Like even when he came on in the cup match a couple of weeks ago, it was Arbroath, but he did change the nature of the performance. He brought energy, a drive to the side, and I think that he did have a really good game, kind of try to weather the storm a wee bit and help him retain the shape and being disciplined with sort of, making sure he's close to his man and doing the simple things that don't stand out all the time necessarily, but I think the big contribution for me, like he's become my kind of Ozturk, but I think compared to you, obviously you're a big Ozturk fan. I love Leon Fontaine just now. The guy does not have a bad game, and I thought he was superb again, defensively. Like he was really solid, like ignoring the fact that he made that brilliant clearance off the line, but his general defensive play was superb. He's comfortable with the ball. When he needs to stick it out the back of the stand, he does it. If he just needs to bang it long at the corners from Malonga and Cummings to chase, he does it. If he's got time and space, he'll slot it into a Robertson, a McGeoch or Allen. I think for me he was our man of the match. McGeoch played really well. Robertson was excellent again. Really, really good performance. And I've just got to bring up Lewis Stevenson purely for that Van Basten-esque goal.
On the subject of McGeoch, it brings up a point to mind for me, the fact that it shows partly how functional and practical a player McGeoch is, that it wasn't raised at any point, the fact that he just slotted in. But Dylan McGeoch is technically a Celtic player playing against Rangers at Ibrox, and I don't think that was even acknowledged at any point, because he's not the kind of player that gets drawn into that in any way, whereas if that was for a central midfielder in Scottish football, you think normally if they've got the wee Scott Brown Ian Black thing to them, they can easily be drawn into a bit of kicking match, and it's they're representing Celtic as well as Hibs, and that just was never raised at any point. And it brings me on to the wider subject of discipline in that Hibs performance. For a team that was under the cosh for long periods of time, I know as a Hearts supporter that when Hearts went to Ibrox in the first game of the season, obviously it was a different scenario, because at that point we weren't sure whether Rangers were good or bad. Turns out certainly not good. We went there and we did operate with a system of tactical fouling. We broke the game up, we took yellow cards, and we followed them round the team. And I know that Hibbies will be thinking, well, that's nothing new for this big physical Hearts team, but in actual fact the midfielders will take the last ditch bookings, but in general terms we don't tend to pick up a huge amount of bookings, but we did specifically, it was part of the tactics. Hibs were under the cosh for a lot of that game, and yet I never thought there were any real questions about discipline or lack of discipline, anyone being drawn into individual battles or looking like they were walking a tightrope. That in itself is quite a positive thing, Craig, isn't it?
Definitely, and I think that's more to do with the experience that we've got in the team now. I mean, if you look at the Scott Robertson's in his late 20s, Scott Allen and Dylan McGeoch early 20s, but they're not the type of players that would get drawn into that sort of, they're not an Ian Black type player who will go and kick somebody and look for a reaction. Even at the back, I mean, you've seen it a few times, Boyd try to throw his weight about with Paul Hanlon, and maybe the Paul Hanlon 2-3 years ago would have shucked away from it and sort of not responded to it, but even he's now got that older head on him, and he's able to stand up for himself and not draw himself into those sort of niggles that you mentioned.
Okay, right, Connor, let's start to kind of round up on this in general terms. We can go another 5 or 10 if we get if there's anything that pops up, but let's start to round off on the performance in general. We've said maybe not the best performance, but you think that was the best system to implement to get the result. With that in mind, we're obviously now going into a playoff chase, and it now becomes about grinding out the results. Is that a formation that you can see Stubbs utilising in less important games, less intimidating atmospheres?
I don't think so. I think it's one he would like to maybe keep in his back pocket for bigger games. I mean, we'll see what happens next year, but and also with our cup run as well, we'll see what happens there. Fingers crossed, we'll be facing a Premiership team at some point. I don't see him using it on a week-to-week basis. I think he's quite happy with his sort of midfield diamond, and I think that brings out the best in our players normally. I think one thing that suffered on Friday was service to our two strikers. I think Cummins and Malonga, although by the time the second goal, that was a fantastic move. I think something we've highlighted before is perhaps Cummins and Malonga don't have the best understanding of one another. I think that was highlighted towards the end of the first half, where a chance where there was a breakaway. Cummins made a fantastic run. Fortunately, it came to nothing because Malonga just got into the wrong space completely. So that is a negative attribute of the 3-5-2 system, and it's it's not making the most of the players that we do have. I mean, I know your dad gets annoyed when I talk about our embarrassment of riches in a striker. I heard that last week, but I mean, we do have at least 3 strikers who are scoring on a regular basis, and potentially 4 or 5 in the months to come. So that's something that we should be using, and I think the diamond midfield lets us make the most of that. I think 3-5-2. If we're probably not going to have many more games like the game on Friday towards the end of the season. I think it might be just games against Hearts and Rangers and potentially cup games. So it's good to know that we can play like that if necessary.
Okay, the game on Friday raises an interesting question, and I think we're going to start to see this more and more as we go on, that we are going to see parallels now between both of our teams. We're going to see parallels in at Tynecastle and Easter Road, because we are in different positions. There is still a fair gulf between, so it's unlikely that we're going to become embroiled in a title race, but we are both looking at now managing games to ensure that the momentum that we have at the moment doesn't let up, to ensure that we don't let the positions that we've managed to attain in the table slip. As we've said, we're seeing at Hearts at the moment, we are managing games out against Livingston, and it's not necessarily. A lot of people are actually looking at it quite negatively. 1-0, and we're thinking, well, we beat them 5-0 early in the season. Something's not working here, and you're thinking, well, but it is working because we're getting the 3 points, and that's all that we need. I do think that Stubbs demonstrated a more practical side of his management style on Friday, in that he went there with the system not necessarily to entertain or to put on the greatest footballing show possible, but simply best place to get the 3 points. Mikey, do you think, moving away from the formation chat, but do you think that practical side of Stubbs is something that's going to come out over the run of games into the playoffs now, just to make sure that Hibs have the best possible chance of holding on to the second place?
I hope so. I think that his experimentation's now out of the way. He knows he's got 2 fairly solid systems that he knows works for particular matches. He's now, especially after the last window, got the personnel to implement them. It might be that even we might see this 3-5-2 more often, but as an actual 3-5-2. So in certain matches we could almost try and overwhelm sides with the fullbacks right out the park, almost the midfielders. But I feel as though he is still learning the job as he goes along as well. But I think that we've now got ourselves in a position where we're not having to catch up. I know that kind of plays into your guys' thoughts of it's miles away, Hibs and Hearts, but we have caught who we need to catch. Obviously they've got games in hand, but the psychological breakthrough has been made that we are now ahead of Rangers. We have accumulated more points than they have. We've beat them 3 times this season in the league, so he now can make those choices if we're going to play out matches in a safer fashion. The curious point for me is if we've got the personnel to do that, or if their instinct is going to be, we're playing really well just now, guys, we're probably playing they might just fancy that we're playing as well as Hearts. It's just taken us 10-12 games to play to that standard. But it might be difficult for them to curb the instincts they've got just now to play and score goals, which is in the first part of the season was so difficult to achieve, and now they're doing it not freely, but with more freedom than previously.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it's been more of a natural progression with Hearts, because Hearts exploded into the league campaign, and as the games have gone on, other teams have started to work them out a wee bit more. They're starting, so it is becoming an exercise in now having enough to get over the lines, because as we've spoke about a number of times, and we spoke about with Christian Nadi at length in the interview there, the SPFL leagues in general, they do become boring and they are monotonous, because you do play everyone 4 times, and Christian was mentioned about the fact that he literally will say, hiya, how you doing, what were you up to the weekend, to opposition players, because he's seen them that much throughout the season that you almost become friends, and we are starting to see that now where teams work you out, whereas Hibs won't necessarily have that, because they took at least one run of fixtures to find this system. So they maybe are still in the period where they can make hay while the sun shines, but that may present a challenge in that, do you then have to start reining it in even though you don't necessarily want to, whereas Hearts don't really have a choice at this moment in time. It's about grinding out the wins. That will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Part of it as well for Hibs is that the system's kind of developed, but we've continued to add new faces to the squad outside both transfer windows. And there's guys playing for contract as well, so it might be that you'll put a sub on, but it's a guy who's been subbed for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Is he going to go on and want to play the disciplined part, or is he going to go on and prove a point and go, I need to be in this side every single week? If it does that, hopefully it's going to have a positive impact on the particular performance that day. But it'll be curious to see if he's got that buy-in from the players, if he says, you guys can go out and play like this and get a 2-0 win in a completely controlled fashion, and we'll preserve whatever maybe energy, or somebody's carrying injuries, we'll not get any bookings. It'll be great to see if we've got a group of guys who can do that now, even at this level, and if we've got a manager that's able to kind of control it that way, or if it's best for us just to keep playing the way we have in the last probably 8 to 10 weeks, where it's kind of dominating the opposition where we can, and just trying to literally score as many goals as we can. So that'd be a kind of a curious sort of development to see how it goes. Yeah,
it's definitely going to be fascinating to watch that play out. Right, speaking of watching it play out, let's get on to the weekend then. We have had a couple of questions raised in terms of the longer part of the season now, which we will go on to afterwards, but let's preview the weekend first. Dumbarton at Easter Road. Craig, are you confident that you can that Hibs will be able to overcome that obstacle?
I hope so. I was at the away game when we put 6 past them earlier on in the season, but that was also, we were 3-0 up at half time. Next thing we knew, we were 3-2. Dumbarton were back in the game. Thankfully, we managed to close the game out. But hopefully, with since that game, the performances have started to pick up a lot more. We're not seeing games where, if that was maybe Hibs at the start of the season, that would have been a draw, or potentially even a defeat. Whereas that game, we sort of we went 3-2 up, shall I say. We then managed to get a 4th goal, then we got a 5th, then we got a 6th. So I think that's coming up to this Saturday. I think that'll play on the Dumbarton players' minds a bit, knowing that even if they get a goal back, we've still got the potential to go on and hit them for more. So I see a comfortable Hibs win this weekend.
Connor, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I feel the same. As like you said, in the earlier run of fixtures, the team seemed to have figured out Hibs quite well. They knew that we were struggling to break them down, and that's changed over the last couple of months. And I think on Dumbarton's run of form, they've tailed away a little bit. I think we should have more than enough in the bag to sort of see them off without too many problems. I mean, to be honest, the worst thing that could happen would be that we lost. But I think if we get another 1-1 draw at home, I think that would be quite a big disappointment to a lot of fans. But I honestly think we've got enough in the bag now. I think the players will have a lot of confidence after last week. We can dispatch Dumbarton. We've done it before. That's becoming less of a problem now. Hopefully that's something we'll put to bed, not being able to win at home. And I feel like the weekend, the players should go out and enjoy themselves, really. They should go out and, you were discussing earlier, I think they should just go out and play from the heart, because I think, it could be quite an entertaining game in that sense.
And another thing that was brought up in the interviews that we did during the week, specifically with Christian Nadi, Colin Nish has gone to Cowdenbeath, so that removes the spectre of, let's no sing the Nish song.
I was going to say, Conor mentioned that Dumbarton's form had tailed off, and that's obviously intrinsically linked with Colin Nish leaving. It's a natural thing that happens with clubs.
How Ian Murray could make such a schoolboy error to let a talismanic figure like Colin Nish go, who knows how that came about.
Cost John Hughes' job, could cost Ian Murray his job.
Yes, indeed. So, right. Let's go on, just spend a couple of minutes as we wrap up on the rest of the season for Hibs. Connor, are the most important games left in the season the game at home to Queen of the South on the 4th of April and the game away to Falkirk on the 2nd of May, just to make sure that Hibs are able to put down a marker to say that we know we've got, we know we can put one over Rangers, we're also now good enough to beat yourselves, like I say, for putting a marker down for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important we've got to steel ourselves against these teams. We haven't done that in a convincing fashion yet. I know we beat Queen of the South last time, but that still is something, that's my main reason for wanting to finish second, is that we just seem to find Falkirk, Wraith and Queen of the South seem to find them a banana skin, and between those three teams we would have to face one of them in the playoffs. So I think it would be quite important not just to beat, especially Falkirk, not just to beat them, but to beat them quite convincingly, and say that phase where we were struggling to beat these teams is over. We're now aiming upwards. I mean, it's quite interesting. I'm sort of surprised, but Stubbs and the players are still talking about catching up with Hearts, and I don't know if that's just it's just big talk, or whether they feel like certain problems within the past are beneath us now, and they're just looking upwards, continuing to sort of strive. There's certain goals that we've achieved this season and certain things that we've overcome. So although I wouldn't be too complacent about facing the sort of 4th to 6th place teams, I'm hoping that the confidence that the squad are showing will mean that it's not an issue as it has been in the past.
That raises a discussion point, and it's a discussion that we're going to spend about a minute on given the time, but it raises a discussion point there. There does seem to be a divide at the moment where there is the odd mention still of looking up the table to Hearts, but Liam Craig seemed to acknowledge on Sportscene yesterday that it is now about establishing Hibs' place in second place and making sure that the momentum continues into the playoffs. I think it goes back, it came to mind when you were talking earlier, Mikey, it goes back to the conversation we had a month or so ago about achievable targets, and I do think that the less I've heard Hibs talk about catching Hearts, the more confident I've been as an outsider that Hibs have got their priorities straight, because I do think that it's all well and good to say, well, we're playing and we're winning games, but ultimately Hearts would have to lose 7 of 12 games to make it in any way possible for Hibs to win the league. That, no matter how badly Hearts were to collapse, that would be unheard of for a team who's lost 1 game all season to lose 7. I just can't see in any way it happening. And I think if Hibs do get preoccupied with the idea of catching Hearts, it then brings this negative thing into the situation, because that's a losing battle as far as I'm concerned, and there's nods around the room, so I think you guys agree. I actually think it's a far more positive thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Rangers still hold the cards for second place as well.
Course,
that's still a big test, but that's an achievable target to set second place. I've been encouraged by the fact that is now the target, because I think Hibs can achieve that, go into the playoffs on a massive high, having done, like we're saying, just discount the first 12 fixtures at this point. Just say we gave ourselves a poor start and we've managed to rescue it from there, put ourselves in the strongest position possible. Is that how you see it, Mikey?
Absolutely. I think that there's a recognition of what's happened at the start of the season. We know it wasn't very good. We probably know the reasons why as well, with the turnover and playing and management staff. I think as well, there's the chit chat might just be chat talking about Hearts. I think there's a group of hopefully intelligent enough players in that dressing room, especially with some good leaders there now, who are realising that this battle isn't about us catching Hearts. It's not what's important. It can't be the be all and end all. We need to give ourselves the biggest cushion possible above, first of all, Rangers and then whoever comes in fourth, whilst giving ourselves an opportunity to flourish in the playoffs. So I think that retaining the momentum is the most important thing, and if we keep winning, then obviously 8-10 games ago when they were maybe talking about catching Hearts, it was more feasible because Hearts would have had to have lost. Well, the gap wasn't as big then, so it might have been 15 points with 20 games to play. That's something worth more talking about. As the kind of gaps increase slightly and the games reduced, then it's going to start to go to bed. So I think that the group of players there will be completely focused, regardless of what they're saying to the papers and interviews and kind of making sound bites. They know that they have to finish second. You want to have that second leg at Easter Road against whoever it is, fill the place, pack it out and get the job done.
Okay, final question to you all then. Scott's raised it, and he's raised it in a manner that would see him, quite rightly, I think, get hammered by the base for it. So I'm going to change it slightly. His question was, who do you fear in the playoffs? But I realise that implies that you must fear someone, which isn't necessarily the case. So I'm going to ask each of you just a very quick answer. Do you fear anyone in the playoffs now? As we say, is there still the looming spectre of, oh no, Queen of the South or Falkirk could make it tricky, and we've still got this, Hibs aspect of things where we could trip up on those obstacles? Mikey, do you fear anyone?
I fear Rangers and all that goes with them, and shall we say potential support they may receive from outside influences to make sure they get over the finish line to get Scottish football looking beautiful again.
Even though in the 3 matches so far, and even I suppose you could argue those elements have just been taken completely out of it, but especially in the first 2, because Hibs won so comfortably, the referee could have given them 3 penalties and you still had the idea Hibs would have just scored enough to win it.
The one time Rangers beat us this season was partly contributed towards by a really, really sketchy red card for Danny Handling. So that element's possible. Like, what's to stop us getting a questionable decision against us that influences one leg, and then Rangers, as hopeless as they seem to be at the moment, could come to Easter Road and play out an 0-0 draw. Hibs
did marginally get away with one, just to touch on it. The Scott Robertson penalty.
It wasn't a touch, it was like an absolute it's a borderline stonewaller.
Okay, so maybe that
makes it a bit sweeter that for once we're getting the rub of the green with the decisions.
I think that maybe that actually implies that
sort of let's make sure Hibs get over the finish line on this one because we need Hibs back in the Premier League.
But then I know what you're saying about it not seen, but don't let it be said that officials haven't guessed decisions at Ibrox previously based on crowd reaction. So it may be actually the other thing we would say there is that a lot of the officiating at Ibrox previously, the negative officiating has been based on crowd reaction. There's not a crowd to react.
There was no reaction from the crowd with that. It was purely the players. Well, you say there couldn't be a crowd reaction because there wasn't really much of a crowd there, but when you see it up and in the country every week, there could be 2 men and a dog playing and someone will still shout handball if they see it, but there was no shouts.
But that's the thing, even the fans that are there, they're so jaded and they're so expectant of the defeat that's coming.
I think a playoff match you'd probably see Ibrox sold out.
They would tell us it was sold out at least.
Hibs the whole broom on end just to kind of sell it out probably, but that my fear is that not the whole conspiracy element of it and everyone's involved, but the subconscious nature, the subconscious nature of it, like sort of, oh my god, my decision could stop Rangers getting back in the Premier League. Am I going to be refereeing pub football like next year
for the greater good of Scottish football? Because Scottish football needs a strong Rangers.
Of course, that recent Old Firm game was just such a fantastic spectacle that we need it back.
It brought thousands back to the game. Craig, do you fear anyone in the playoffs?
I would say, providing we finish second, I would say Rangers as well. Purely because I think that by the time that the playoffs come around, they are loan players that they've got in for their parent club. Newcastle will have settled down, got themselves fit. That Ferguson's a decent player. Vucic has shown, against Rafe and flashes against us that he's a decent player. So they would be the ones that I would fear, but then again, they should be fearing us. We shouldn't be fearing anybody else.
On the subject of their parent club, should we? I quite like the chat during the week. Should we be adopting the new name for Rangers as Newcastle? I thought that was quite decent. To be fair, I might start utilising that on the show. Connor, do you fear anyone? I'm expecting you to be a bit more defiant than the other two guys. I didn't really like this Rangers chat.
Well, no, I mean, I think the thing about Rangers is it's the old paranoia. It would just be like Hibs. If we beat Rangers in our next game and we play them 6 times in a season, and the time that really matters we blow it, that would just just be Hibs. You know, our aggregate score against them so far is 9-1, and I can just imagine all that being for naught in the end. You know, so but I'd say that's more on the fans' mind than on the players' minds. I think, you know, as Craig just said, they really should be fearing us. But, you know, as a fan, you can't help it. You know, you do have these nagging doubts. The litmus test will be the upcoming games against teams that are just sort of slightly below us in the league. You know, we need to put that to bed to make sure that even if we do finish third, that we're not worried about that first leg in the playoffs. And, you know, Hamilton managed it last year. As far as I remember, they played all three legs of the playoffs, and, you know, they coped fine. We've got really great strength.
I think Hamilton were second, so they played 4 games.
Okay, but they still, you know, they had a tough round of matches before they came at Hibs,
and a much smaller squad than Hibs can utilise.
Yeah, we got such strength and depth. Just, I mean, like, there's a lot of Premiership sides that would love to have like Fraser Fivey and Liam Craig and, you know, Dejeji on the bench, and that's like our standard bench now is really strong. I think it's interesting that nobody is even slightly concerned about the potential Premiership teams they'll be facing. I think there's some really hopeless teams at the bottom of the Premiership.
We can't possibly get a team as bad as Hibernia of 2014. We can't play such an insipid team.
Well, Motherwell seem to be trying to follow a similar trajectory. They're plummeting down.
Well, that is the thing. I think you look at the standard of team that exists at that bottom of the league, and in actual fact, I think probably you could make an argument to say that Falkirk and Queen of the South are both more formidable opposition than any of the 3 currently occupying those bottom 3 places in the SPL, because they've got a bit more wherewithal, and at least they've got some momentum. They win games, whereas if you encounter St Mirren or Ross County or a club like that, they're just going to be so used to losing at that point.
We know that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that exact same
You become
situation.
conditioned to it and almost accepting of it. And even when you get in a positive situation, as we saw with Hibs, you're looking at how you get back to losing the game.
Can we possibly make a mess of this?
Yes. Aye, Sean, you've stuck around for all that Hibs chat throughout the night, so I thought I would give you the final say on this.
Let's go for it. As
an outsider, should Hibs fear anyone in the playoffs?
In the current form and what they've been shown recently, I wouldn't say so. I think it's funny that all 3 has went for Rangers when, especially if you guys finish second, which I think you should do at this point. Who's guaranteed? It's no guaranteed that you even come up against Rangers. As you say, Mikey, and it is a valid point. I've alluded to it before. There is the higher beings who might want to see them getting there. But we've seen it this season. I mean, they should have scored at the weekend there. The Chris Boyds and Kenny Millers of previous days probably would have got a goal, but they've not got it in them anymore. They're certainly not showing it. Although they showed a bit more creativity, they're just not the team that people expect. So I did find it funny that all 3 has went for that. As you said, though, Connor, there isn't a worry about an SPL team. I've been saying it for a while. I'm thinking whoever the Championship team is that gets through the playoffs will beat the Premier League team. It's just, I think it's shown the calibre of the Championship is very, very close to the SPL list, or the SPFL this season, the top league. So I don't think Hibs need to fear anyone. I think it will depend on the last couple of games of the season, the form teams going into it. I think that will play a big part. But the Hibs are, as we've touched on a lot tonight and in previous weeks, the Hibs have got the strength of squad there, and they seem to have the formations down now that they should be the team going into it. They should be the team looking to come back up, which is good for everyone involved here, because it means it's a positive end to the season for everyone involved with the show. Yeah, definitely. And those playoff episodes are definitely going to be especially exciting. As Sean says, I kind of agree with him. I think there's a chance, as Friday's game encapsulated, yes, the referees will be able to give Rangers a helping hand, but they won't be able to use that hand to punch the ball in the net. And at the moment, there's no one else that looks capable or confident enough to actually put the ball in the net. Maradona is without a contract, though, so you never know. That's true. They ended up with Caniggia a few years ago, so you never know. They can go with that. Right, okay, we're going to wrap up there. One thing before we go, because it may interest some of our listeners who have stayed with us at this moment in time. Needless to say, this one will be 2 podcasts when it goes up tomorrow
right? You can win 2 tickets to see the Legends of Darts on Saturday. Radio Saltaire have 2 tickets to give away for the Legends of Darts extravaganza this coming Sunday 22nd. That said Saturday a minute ago, and now it says Sunday 22nd of February.
There is 2 days.
Okay,
I know that much.
So it's Sunday the 22nd of February, which is being held at the Con Exchange in Haddington, and stars Wayne Mardell.
Wayne Mardell. Hawaii 5-0.
Well, there you go. You know what, you should be reading this rather than me. Bob Anderson, Dennis Priestley and Peter Manley. 1 prize of 2 free tickets are up for grabs. All you have to do is answer the following question: what is the highest score that you can attain in a game of darts with just 3 darts? Is it, and Connor, you're going to do the darts announcement for me here after these, is it 145?
145. I'll go with this. Mikey's the darts fan as well, guys.
Okay, right, we'll get Mikey to do it. We'll go again. Is it A, 145?
145.
Like lived in voice. Is it B, 180?
180.
Or is it C, 195?
195.
Okay, simply email your answer A, B or C to competition@radiosaltire.org or text us on 07507 332244. Remember to tell us who you are and provide us with a contact number so we can call you if you win. All correct entries will be placed in a hat and the winner will be drawn and announced during the Great Golden Oldies show with Andy Morris at noon on Sunday. So if you're interested in darts at all, get your entries into that. What we're going to leave you with is a few excerpts of our interviews that we conducted during the week. The first will be with Derek Ray, the BT Sports commentator, who you would have heard his dulcet tones on the game on Friday night. He was providing the soundtrack to yet another Hibs victory over Rangers this season. And the second clip you will hear is Christian Nadi, former Hearts striker, current Wraith Rovers striker. Both interviews are between an hour and a half and 2 hours and provide a real kind of interesting insight into their careers.
It's another beautiful day in Aldrike. The Welsh are out in force in this part of Edinburgh, the Haymarket area, and Scott and myself are here with Derek Gray of BT Sport. Derek, thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Sam.
So what we'll do is we'll start at the beginning, because it makes the most sense, and we will walk through from there and see where the journey takes us. Much like your career, it may go in some unexpected directions, but we will see. So a lot of people make reference to the fact that you were well known as a youngster to be watching youth football, watching Aberdeen games, armed with a tape recorder to learn the art of commentary. Is that the case? How young did you start there?
It's 100% true, and I'm sure a lot of the people who spotted this strange youngster with a tape recorder under his arm remember it, because a few have stopped me in the streets of Aberdeen saying, you were that boy that I used to see at the Tawdry at the reserve games talking to himself, you know. And I did talk to myself. It actually goes way back to 1974. That was the first World Cup I can remember, and it was in West Germany as it was. And I was fascinated with the football. I was fascinated with the German side of things, which was to become part of who I am, really. But I also still have tapes from that World Cup of myself talking into a tape recorder, impersonating all the pundits and doing my own first fledgling commentaries. So it kicked on from there. Would take the tape recorder to amateur games, plucked up the courage to take it to Tawdry, to reserve games, and I would just sit in the front of the stand and didn't really care what people thought. And I think that's quite important, because if you do the job that I do now, you can't really worry about what people think. You've just got to get on with it. You've got to develop a bit of fluency, and that's how I learned the trade. And from that point on, I sent a couple of tapes to my hero, David Francie, who was the main BBC Radio Scotland commentator at the time. Had a very rich voice, a very distinctive way of talking. Really strong voice. Scottish commentator, Scottish to the core, and resonated with me. And he was very helpful in getting me to a higher level, listening to my tapes. The voice hadn't broken at that point, but giving me tips, passing on little things that he did to make his commentaries better. And later, he was to, in a small way, assist me with getting started with the BBC.
Throughout the process of going out to our audience and asking for questions for yourself, it has come back that a lot of people feel that you have a soft spot for their team, which is interesting because in Scottish football normally it's the other way about. The referee, he definitely supports the opposition, whereas and I suppose it's a pat on the back for yourself that people feel that when their team scores, you genuinely are excited about the fact that they've scored. But it's an odd situation where people feel like, a lot of people have said, does he have a soft spot for Hearts?
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard people say that.
Do you get that wherever you go? Do you hear it from a lot of different fans?
Yeah, and you'll get it the other way too. I think what's interesting in the case of Edinburgh, now I've been back, broadcasting Edinburgh derbies now since 2009, having done quite a lot of them in the 80s on the radio side. And if you think about it, if you think about the trajectory of the derby, which is a fixture that you guys obviously are particularly engaged in, and it's one of my great, one of my favourite fixtures as well. If you think about the trajectory of the Edinburgh derby, last few years, Hearts have dominated it. There was a season a couple of years ago where Hibs, did much better in it, but by and large, Hearts have been the team in the ascendant in that derby. Now, as a commentator, when you're commentating on Hearts triumphs and Hibs defeats, it's hard not to sound enthusiastic about the triumphs. And I used to say the same about David Francie, who I say was my hero. When I would listen to him commentating in the 70s, it was the Celtic team of Jock Stein, and it was Danny McGrath and Kenny Dalglish, as he would say, all these wonderful players from that era. And I was convinced that David was a rampant Celtic supporter. He wasn't actually, but I used to think he was just because he was getting quite excited. And I've spoken to other commentators about this, and we are inextricably linked with the matches that we cover. So there are probably a lot of Hibs fans that think I'm anti-Hibs because if they've heard the derbies the last few years, in many cases it's been a tale of woe for Hibs. But it comes in cycles, and but I have heard that from a few Hearts fans. What I would say is that Hearts have given me probably better material than any club in the last 5-6 years. I'm thinking in terms of some of the derby wins. I'm thinking of the game at Anfield when Templeton scored near the end and almost sent the tie into extra time. Last season, the dramatic happenings, even though Hearts got relegated, there was a sort of a backstory to that. And I've always felt too that Tynecastle is a particularly special place for atmosphere. And it's always been, I would say it's probably my favourite venue in Scottish football. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to two Jambos here. I genuinely mean it, and I thought that back in the 80s, and I always have an extra sort of spring in my step when I'm in Gorgie and doing a game at Tiny.
Was it more performance-related pay at Hull as well?
Yeah, there was some speculation that they were worried about you in terms of injuries. Is that...
Maybe. I don't know exactly. But when I was at Hearts, Sheffield, I've been injured once. It was my shoulder and it's still sore now.
Right.
But that's all. But I don't know what happened. But I refused. And then Neil Warnock told me, look, you're gonna go to Sheffield, to Hearts. Mm-hmm. You're gonna sign a contract for 3 years. I'm gonna go to. In a few months, he knew already what he was going to do. So he went to Crystal Palace. Yeah. And I will make an offer for you to come and sign for Crystal Palace in January. So I went to Hearts. I've done what I have to do in Hearts, and in January he made the offer. Like he said, I don't know if you remember that, but he made the offer for, I think it was 700,000 or 650,000. Okay. So I said, okay, I'm gonna leave Hearts, and Romanov said, no, I'm staying here. So I said, but that's not the deals that we've made. They said, no, you're staying here. So every 6 months. Warnock made an offer, but they didn't let me go.
So when you signed for Hearts, initially it was a short-term thing in your mind.
Yes, it was 6 months.
Would you have signed for Hearts initially had that not been the case? Well, this is interesting for us. We've never heard this before. I don't think we knew, because obviously for us it was a 3-year deal that you signed at Hearts.
I signed a 3-year deal, but I had to leave after 6 months. So
how did, just to go off that subject slightly for a moment then, how did Vladimir Romanov get involved in those dealings between, you know, Neil Warnock has identified you need to go somewhere and play before he can take you at Crystal Palace. How does Vladimir Romanov and Hearts become involved in that situation?
To be honest, I don't even know.
Right.
I just know that I had to go for Hearts, play as many games as I could in first team to stay in shape and to stay fit, to be able to join.
There was talk of like Neil Warnock wanting to go to Hearts as well to manage the club.
He almost went
at a
as well.
certain point,
He
yeah.
almost went as well, yeah.
So essentially, you were on as far as you were concerned, you were on loan at Hearts, but you were contracted there.
No, I wasn't.
But it was like a loan.
something like
So
that,
you
yeah.
were going there almost like Dale arrived at Wraith Rovers to keep playing, to get fit, so that you could then move on to the next place and you were fit and ready to go. Okay, so with that in mind, going back to the previous question, would you have signed for Hearts had that not been the case? Do you think you would have been attracted to Scottish football at that stage of your career?
To be honest, before I left Sheffield, I spoke with some players, I don't remember the name, asked them questions about Hearts, and most of them were Celtics fans, but they told me that Hearts is a really, really good club with really, really good fans. So, yes, in fact, after what I heard from them, I just wanted to go, and I was really, really happy to go. And I remember I was still young, I was 21, I think, yeah. And I was on my way in my car, and I was crying in a car. I was crying in the car because it was difficult, you know. It was difficult for me to come to Sheffield without any of my family. I went with my best friend. It was difficult, and then I had to move just a year later to go to another country on my own because my agent wasn't there. So I just took my car, I put the address on the sat nav, and I just drove. And it was really, really difficult. People and fans sometimes don't understand how difficult it is to leave your family, your friends, moving all the time. So I took my car, I drove like 4 hours, and I stopped in Newcastle, I remember, to have a McDonald's.
There's a recurring theme here.
To be honest, I stopped in McDonald's, and
Sounds like one of my car journeys.
no, it was late. It was like 12 o'clock at night, and we didn't eat all day. So stopped McDonald's, and the guy, it was a drive-through, and the guy started to talk. I couldn't understand any word of what he was saying, and I was, oh my God! I was thinking, what we gonna do? What are we gonna do? He said, just be strong, and we started to laugh in the car, and he said, okay, let's do it. So we went to the hotel in the Holiday Inn hotel near the zoo. And someone came pick me up in the morning, and it was my first station, and I started to feel good. The player were okay, and I forgot about what I've done before. But in my head, I knew that I would leave in January.
Okay. Right, let's get on to your time at Hearts.